You all set?
You're all set.
Okay, great. I'd like to welcome everybody to the resume writing workshop. I appreciate you all being here, and I'm happy to share some interesting information with you about resume writing, format, content, things like that. Okay, so I'd like to just put my PowerPoint up so that everybody can kind of follow along with what I have to say. Okay, great. Okay, probably one of the most important components of your resume is that it is your opportunity to make a first impression. And you know how everyone says you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So taking the time to do a great resume is incredibly important. So some of the things that I hope you're going to take away from this particular workshop is that identifying the proper format of a resume and the content of a resume, know how to write a basic resume, and then really recognize that importance of a well-written resume. So those are going to be our key focuses as we go through this workshop. So what is a resume? Basically, a resume is going to be your summary of qualifications. Now, what are your qualifications? Well, it's going to be your education, and we're going to talk about how you go about listing your education correctly so that it communicates what you want it to communicate. Secondly, your experiences and all types. So this is not only your job opportunities that you might have had, while you're in college or before you came to college. This might be internship experiences, job shadow experiences, all different things, and we'll talk about how we put those out there. Your skills. It could be from keyboarding skills or accounting skills, nursing skills, anything like that that we're going to talk about that you get as a result of your education here at JCC. And then lastly, this is a marketing tool. This is going to advertise you. So you need to be able to put yourself out there and put your best foot forward. And the way you put your best foot forward is developing a well-rounded resume. So your resume is obviously most often used when applying for employment, and that's what we really think. I mean, anybody that has done a resume or has had a resume thinks, okay, when I'm going to go look for a new job, that's when I have to revamp my resume. But that's not the only opportunity to use your resume. You can use it for internships, maybe a summer position, graduate or professional school. There's a lot of other opportunities that you may need to use your resume for submission to things. Also, your resume really is a screening tool. Any HR professional sitting at their desk that puts a job opportunity out there, and they're going to get a bunch of resumes in. And basically, your resume needs to pass the 10 to 20 second scan, which basically means you have a professional sitting there. They're going to look at your resume. If there's something that pops out in that 10 to 20 seconds, you're going to get put in the pile that, okay, maybe we're going to look at them further, maybe we're going to give them an interview. If something doesn't pop up, you're probably going to get in the circular file, never to see the light of day again. And we live in a competitive job market. It's just the way it is. And so as a result of that competitive aspect of things, you have to make sure your resume stands out. So basically the process is this: you do a great resume that will grant you an interview. You have some great references available that will speak highly of you, and ultimately it lands that job offer. So that's really what I hope for everyone that's out there searching for a job. So there's a couple of formats of resumes that we can talk about. I'll talk about the one I like the best, but it doesn't matter. Both are equally as beneficial. There's the reverse chronological resume. This will emphasize your work experience or your work history, and it emphasizes around dates, and it will highlight your career profession. So when we talk about reverse chronological order, we're going to talk about whatever you've done most recently will come first, and then you'll kind of work back in time. The second type of resume format is a functional or skills-based resume. It's going to organize that around your functional headings or around your highlighting of your skills or your abilities. Both are very acceptable in the business world. I will tell you, for me, I like the reverse chronological resume better. I just feel like it's able to lead the person that is looking at your resume through what you've done to get to this point. but not to diminish the other one as well. So we'll kind of talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of both, and what one might work for you depending on what you're looking for in your next job opportunity. So with reverse chronological, some of the advantages, it really is easier to understand your job history because you're going to have the job you have right now, and you're going to be able to list everything, all your responsibilities that you do. And then you'll move on to the job you had before that, and so on, all the way back in time, as far back as you decide that you want to go. So it really helps you understand your job history. It's going to help the name of your previous employer stand out. That may mean something to a potential person that's going to interview you as they're looking at your resume. Your reverse chronological will typically be when you're staying in the same field, because, for example, if you are an accountant and you just want to move on to another accounting job, looking at that you've been with ABC accounting company and XYZ accounting company, it kind of shows your career progression. Some of the disadvantages is it's not as easy to highlight maybe what you do best. Maybe you put 3 or 4 bullets underneath your responsibilities for your respective job. Maybe that doesn't showcase it as much as you might like. Now with the functional or the skills-based resume, the big advantage would be that it assists you in achieving a new goal or direction. Really the biggest thing is it allows your skills to stand out, because what happens is you create categories on what you want to stand out. So let's say you're a marketing professional. Maybe you have your one heading of marketing skills. Maybe your second heading is, advertising skills. Maybe your third heading is PR skills. And so it allows you to highlight your skills in a little bit more depth or a little bit better than you would if you were having a functional, if you were having a chronological resume. Would you like to come join the resume workshop? No, okay, just thought maybe if you were looking for it. One of the disadvantages really is it's harder for the employer to see maybe exactly what you did and what position you did that in, because typically your headings are going to be your skill sets, not your headings of what other companies that you've worked for. So sometimes that's a little bit difficult to see. So here's just some examples. I know that this is a little bit small in the sample there, but with the reverse chronological resume, the format is such that you have your job titles, and it quickly allows the reader to identify, what profession you are looking at. It will list the job duties and the highlighting of those, so your job responsibilities. It will list your education, followed by your additional skills. And we're going to kind of go through that format as we continue through this workshop. So you basically have your job skills, your job, you have your skills listed under that, you have your education, and then you have additional skills, abilities, attributes, things along that line for a typical reverse chronological resume. If you have a typical functional resume, it's going to begin with a summary of qualifications. Now, that's not to say that you can't put a summary of qualifications on your reverse chronological resume, because I'm going to advocate that you kind of do in a different way that I'll show you. But I think that summary of qualifications is such a great part of a functional resume. Sometimes I'd like to advise students that they add that into their chronological resume, because I think that really helps. But then the example of this resume, then it's followed by experience in job areas. For example, it will showcase here leadership, management, technical skills, planning and budgeting. So those will be the headings, and then you will advocate your responsibilities in that regard for each of those respective headings, okay? So as we kind of go through, we're going to talk about formatting a little additional and see what works best for you as you begin to develop your resume, at least if you're thinking about it in your head, okay? Now, no matter what type of resume format you're going to do, some of these things will kind of stand the test of time no matter what style you do. So first of all, stick to 10 to 12 font. You want it to be easy to read. You don't want it to be too small that somebody with bad eyes like me can't see it. Typically, you want to use standard fonts. Don't get fancy with your fonts. Get things that are easy to read, and especially also from an electronic perspective, if you are filing those electronically with different companies, which you normally do, you want to keep it simple. As far as appearance and style goes, maybe use bold, italics, caps, underlining. I usually advise, like if you're going to do your headings, I might do a heading in a bold, or I might have it in all caps. Again, something that allows it to stand out as you go through the different formatting. Use lines to separate your headings. Bullet statements are a must, because again, you have to think about it this way. Somebody is looking at your resume very quickly. If you just have a whole paragraph of information about what your responsibilities are, you have to read through it. It's difficult to see. It doesn't present itself well. If you take that paragraph of information and put it out in bulleted format, it's going to be so much easier to read in a quick manner. You want to have a 1/2 inch to 1 inch margins on all 4 sides, pretty standard. You want to have a nice balance of white space and text. Again, if you have a rather short work history and maybe your resume is only a 1/2 of a page, come to me, we can talk about that, like spread it out, create some white space, maybe add a few things that will help. Also, you don't want to use any kind of different colored paper or things like that. You want to have a neutral professional resume paper. Now, I will tell you, the majority, 99% of all the jobs that you will apply for, you will apply online. It's just simply the way it is in today's society. But that's not to say that there's not an occasion to have a nicely done up resume on a nice bonded neutral color piece of paper. I always advise students that, so you've submitted your resume online, and let's say you are going to be granted an interview. I always tell students, take a nice clean copy of your resume with you on some nice bonded paper. It creates that positive impression as well, that you're here, you're ready, you're professional. So I always, advise students to do something like that as well, even though you'll mostly be applying online. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I learned that worked for me is when you write the bullet points, okay, I did this, and this was the effect, right? So anytime you can enhance it by, I managed this program, which saved $500,000.
Yeah, if you can quantify what your responsibility was, that takes it up another notch, absolutely. Great idea. You do want to be sure that you spend ample time preparing your resume, and don't be concerned if you have to write and rewrite it. Anyone out there that's listening that wants my help, I'm always available to help students rewrite and review their resume. You might have looked at it 100 times, and you might submit it to me, and maybe I look at it for 10 seconds and maybe a typo pops up that you just didn't see. Or maybe I find a better way that you're able to say something that you're just not able to see. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, to write and rewrite. Students have ingrained in their head that a 1-page resume is usually sufficient. And I'm going to agree to a certain extent. If you have maybe limited experience and maybe your education is here at JCC and that's it, maybe a 1-page resume is sufficient. Maybe by the time you do your jobs that you've had, maybe your skills and your education, maybe 1 page is all it's going to get. If you have been in the workforce for a while, 2 or more pages is really going to be necessary. There's no way you're going to be able to showcase enough of what you've done or can do to a potential employer unless you do that couple of pages. So don't keep that, no, it has to only be 1 page. It doesn't necessarily only have to be 1 page. I advocate that you customize your resume for each position. Again, you might have the umbrella of it. Maybe you're graduating JCC with a business administration degree. Okay. Are you looking for a management position within a company? Maybe you're looking for an entry-level accounting position because you've taken some accounting classes with your business administration degree. So keep those things in mind. It's not uncommon to have more than 1 resume targeting whatever it is that you may be targeting. I can look at myself, for example. I have a lot of different hats that I wear here at JCC. I'm not going anywhere, I'm not leaving or anything, but if I were to be writing my resume, I would have a couple of different resumes because I do a couple of different things here, and I would want my resume to focus on that if I'm applying for an instructor position or if I'm applying applying for a position that might deal with employment responsibilities and things like that. You want to catch your reader's eye, use action verbs. In the packet that I gave you, there's some action verbs in there, so it's somewhere in that packet. So you can utilize that. So if you're stumped for words to use, there's some suggestions there for you. Accentuate your positive. And as Stan was adding in, quantify when possible. So, if you're a middle level, managed 100 employees and increased productivity by 5% over the last 3-year period, that you quantify. It shows that you have some management ability because you've been able to increase productivity. So keep those things in mind as you write your resume. Remember the 3 C's: clarity, consistency, and conciseness. You want to make sure your presentation is clear. You don't want to mix your categories and dates. So in other words, when you start your formatting, stick to it. Don't start, changing things around. If you're going to bold every title, bold it throughout. Don't bold and then underline and then italicize. It doesn't create that consistency. And summarize and highlight, but don't pad. You have good things that you've done. That's what you want to put down. You don't want to over exaggerate, because that will be a surefire way to for an employer to maybe recognize that you're not exactly what you have done, what you said you've done, and that could really derail any kind of interview that you might be granted. So oftentimes students come to me and say, okay, how do I choose what's on the final draft of my resume? You want to look at the things that are most relevant to the job. One of the things you want to do is look at the job description. What kind of job are you applying for? Okay, so look at what they're looking for, and then think about the things that you've either done in your education, skills that you have, or job experience that you have that relate directly back to what they're looking for. And that's what you want to showcase. That's relevant to the job. That's what you want to highlight. What you've done most recently is more important, because that's what somebody is going to look for. What you're doing right now is what's most prevalent in their mind. So showcase what you're doing right now. And what makes you unique from other candidates? Are there things that stand out about you? Do you know a second language? Do you have a sense of leadership? Have you done a lot of things with the Leadership Academy? Think about the things that can set you apart from others, and that's really what you want to showcase. Again, your categories will vary depending on your qualifications or your intended goal. Consider several revisions of it, and you want to describe the duties and the tasks performed. What skills have you developed? What added value do you have? So as we kind of go through some samples of resumes, that's what we're going to be focused on. How can you demonstrate the added value and your accomplishments and things like that in the format of your resume? Okay, so here we go. What goes in the resume content? Okay, at the top of your resume, you want to have centered at the top your heading. And you want to have your full name. You can put in a nickname if you wish, if it's a shortened abbreviation of your name. For example, my name is Melanie. I go by Mel. Maybe I might put that in parentheses because it's typical and normal. But like if your boyfriend calls you honey cakes or something like that, that's not what we're talking about. You don't want to put that in parentheses at all. Your complete address. And if you have like a permanent one or a present one, you can include both. Like for example, this would be typical for college students that might go away to college. Maybe they have a home address where their parents live, but maybe they have a temporary address at their college. That's what we're talking about there. You can put both on if you would like to. Phone number. You want to list your cell phone numbers, home, work, or cell phone. Now, your work phone number, only if you're going to be able to get calls at work. If you're not able to do that, don't put that on there. And I always tell students to designate with a C, an H, or a W in front of the phone number, simply because I've been on the end where I'm calling people to set up an interview. I want to know what number I'm calling, right? If I'm calling a home number, or if I'm calling a cell phone number or a work number, I want to kind of know that. Give the person that's potentially calling you for an interview a heads up on what they're calling. And your email address. Always make sure you have your email address. Now, speaking of that, I want to talk about good examples and bad examples of your heading, okay? Now, you want to be sure that you have your name fully spelled out, your address, and see here you have your cell phone number and your home phone number as it's listed there, C in parentheses and H in parentheses. And then here, this particular, Cecilia here has a professional email. It is her name at gmail.com. Very professional, right? As opposed to the second example here, where we have sexycc at gmail.com. You don't want to have that kind of email. You might have a fun email for your friends and things, and that's fine. You want to have your name at wherever. That's the only professional email address you have. I mean, if you're, Game Player 101 or, Hot Mama or anything like that, that's fine socially, not fine professionally, because it's going to be very difficult for me as a business professional to email you at, sexycc@gmail.com and have a professional conversation with you. So something to keep. If you don't have a professional email, get one before you start drafting your resume. Now, there's two scenarios relating to whether you should put an objective or a professional profile on your resume. So as I was sharing with you, with the functional resume, they do a summary of skills. What I advocate with my students is to do a professional profile. I like a professional profile better. I think it summarizes who you are, and it passes that 10 to 20 second test, right? You read it right away, you know exactly what is going on with that person. So I think the objective really used to be the gold standard. I mean, I'm super old, so when I did my first resume, the objective was the gold standard, but I just don't feel that's what employers are looking for right now. I feel a professional profile really takes you further in what your ultimate goal is. So let's take a look at a couple of those, okay? So here's a sample of a professional profile. It is in paragraph form and bulleted form. Again, how you do it depends on what the style of your resume is and how that all comes out on paper. But for this particular sample, customer service representative with over 4 years of experience of account administration and telephone sales, expert at designing and implementing sales strategies, possess excellent customer service, sales, and communication skills, implemented a new sales strategy, cutting training expenses by 90% while increasing close ratio to 10% within 3 months. That's going back to what Stan was saying, where you are qualifying what it is you're able to do. And so this is a great opening paragraph or even opening bulleted list. It shows the employer right away some of the key skills for you. So anytime a student comes into my office, the first thing I'm going to have them do is really work on a professional profile. Get something out there that showcases the best skills that you have to get it right there, right from the start, okay? Now, if a student would like to do an objective, I will, help you with that as well. Some objectives here that would be good, like an internship at Computer Science Corporation in computer programming, or a management training position at the Bank of America. You have to be specific. This is what I want. And what you want is with that company, right? So if you're an entry-level accountant looking for an accounting position, accounting/bookkeeping position with ABC Bank, not just any bank, you want it at ABC Bank because that's where you're applying, okay? The other objectives here, they're vague and not well done. An internship utilizing my skills and training. What is that? What is your skills and training? What are you trained at? Is it accounting? Is it computer science? Or a position in financial services where I can learn and progress in my career? Yeah, learning and progressing in your career is fine, but it's not what the company, you have to think of, what's this company looking for? And you have to prove that you are what this company is looking for. Because it's a good fit. It's like dating, it really is, right? I mean, because they're sizing you up and you're sizing them up, and you have to decide if you're the right fit for each other, if you're the right match. Okay, so you go ahead and you do your heading, you create a professional profile. Now we can talk about how do you want to showcase your education. Basically, your degree should be in reverse chronological order, meaning the most recent degree should come first and then so on. You want the names and location of your school or program, graduation date, the degree or the certificates with your major or minor listed. You do not need to include your high school education. The assumption is made is once you're in college and potentially soon to be graduating from college, the assumption is made you've completed high school. And again, going back to, they're looking what you've done most recently. That's what's going to be important. I have asked students, or I've had students ask me, can I put some things about my high school education on there? And if there's been things that have been outstanding, maybe they've done leadership within their high school education or something along that line that stands out, then we've added that in. But for the most part, focus on, if your most recent education is your JCC education, focus on that, okay? And I've given you a sample here on how to do it. So you want to do, and in the packet of information that you have too, that has it in there as well, so that if you want to make sure you do it correctly. So here we have SUNY, Jamestown Community College, Olean, New York. We have Associate in Applied Science, Medical Office Technician, and graduation date May of 2007. That's pretty much a typical standard way that you can do your education. And most of the time, students will make sure that they put their dates in. You really only need to put the date that you graduated. I mean, some students want to put when they started, when they graduated. I'm okay with that. I'm not that offended on that, so you can do that if you want. But making sure you have your college listed. You don't have to put the exact address. Just Olean, New York is sufficient, or Jamestown, New York, if you're, you know, at the Jamestown campus. Okay, some elements relating to coursework, and I think that this is an important category within your resume. Now, the category can be called different things. Sometimes students have labeled it core competencies. You can related coursework. You could do skills and abilities, skills and attributes. I've had students do all of those types of things, okay? And really what you want to do is it's going to list your specific knowledge. It's going to list some courses that you've taken that are really relevant to the field. So if we go back to the example I gave with the education with our medical office technology student, maybe some of her related coursework, if she's applying to a doctor's office to be a medical office assistant, maybe medical terminology, maybe Word 2016. And very importantly, if you're putting down computer knowledge, you want to be specific. Is it Word 2016? Is it Microsoft Office Suite? What is it that, do you know Excel? Do you know PowerPoint? Do you know Access? It's those things that they're looking for. So you can be very specific in that. Maybe biology. Maybe if we're talking about an accounting student, maybe they're going to put down financial accounting, or maybe, you know, accounting 101, or whatever the accountings you've done, you might put those down. Maybe you want to put down information relating to a business law class that you've taken or something like that. So think about what the job responsibilities are, what you've done that's going to make you be above and beyond other individuals, okay? Now, how about experience? We've all had different kinds of experiences. And here's the deal, people. All of us have been out there in the workforce. Some of us have jobs that we have had great experiences at, and some of us have jobs where it's not been great experience. But you want to make the most of every job you've had, and you want to showcase the best parts of that job that you can, okay? So you might include full and part-time jobs, summer positions, volunteer work, military service, internships, self-employment, and even activities if they're directly related to the position. Like, for example, maybe if you're applying for an accounting position, maybe you've been the treasurer for a local club or organization for the past 15 years. That's directly relating to the experience that you want for the job that you're going for. So here's, it goes on to say, sorry, in some cases you might want to divide the category into two sections. If you have a lot of job experience, maybe it's related experience and maybe additional experience. And again, we can talk about related experience would be if you've had jobs in that field. For example, if you are applying for a job as a medical administrative assistant, maybe you've worked at the Park and Shop, but then maybe most recently you've interned with Dr. Smith's office. So related experience, internship with Dr. Smith's office, and you want to showcase that first. Then additional experience working at the Park and Shop. Again, both are good experiences, but they just come to you with different components of things. So here, when you list your experience, and again, this is also in your pamphlet, so you don't have to worry about jotting it down. You want to list what you've done. What is your responsibility? So here, it's a clinical pharmacist assistant. Showcase that first. This is the job you did. You have the dates. Underneath here, here's the name of the hospital, Palmetto Health Richland Memorial Hospital in Richmond, Virginia. And then you want to bullet, again, 4 to 5, 3, it really just depends, responsibilities that you've had, okay? Partner with and help doctors, develop positive relationship, develop an archive system, train employees, so things that you've done. And typically you want to use wording that shows initiative, that shows action, things that you've done. And I tell students, if you can do to 5 bullet points under that job, that's probably decent. Again, if you've been at a job for 20 years, it could be different than that. And you could have way more bulleted information. So this is a great way to, yes, I'm sorry.
Notice that you're not using periods at the end of your bullets.
Yeah, fragmented sentences. I don't usually do a bullet after that, or I mean a period after that, but I suppose if you were doing a more formalized sentence, because usually you just bullet point.
I don't
know if there's, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if there's a right answer to that. I just tend to not. That's usually typically for me. So good question. Okay, so now you've had your main categories, right? So now if you look at this, you have a professional profile, you've outlined your education, your work experience, and your skills and attributes. You can have additional categories. The additional categories are just going to be, again, related to whether you have those things or not. So you can have a category of honors, activities, professional affiliations. Again, if you have those things, I would put those on there. For example, maybe you belong to, the Exchange Club in Olean, and you've been an active participating member of that for 15 years. That's a great thing that's a professional affiliation. Maybe if there's different professional affiliations within your job responsibility, I would put that out there as well. If you are looking for an accounting position, maybe you belong to the National Accounting Association, if there is such a thing, you want to put that on there. You might want to list like activities or leadership positions and the related skills. Like as I said, you're part of the Exchange Club and you've been the treasurer for 15 years, I would showcase that if you're applying for an accounting position. Honors or awards, like for example, the Presidential Service Award for volunteer hours or the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society. If you have those things that are going on for you, create a category. Again, create the category and the heading just as you've done every other one, if you've bolded them or capitalized them or whatever, and list them. Skills and attributes, as I was sharing with you, I do feel that that's an important, whether you call it core competencies, skills and attributes, whatever you call it, I think it's an important component of your resume. So as I said, be specific if you are talking about computer skills. Also, if you speak more than one language, you want to indicate your proficiency. More and more, it does put you at the top of a pile if you're able to speak more than one language. I can't, I wish I could, but I can't. Also, I do feel that in the realm of your resume, some of your soft skills also play a role in the employee that you will be, okay? Now, for example, when you're here at JCC, what we teach you is we teach you the hard skills, basically, right? If you are in a word processing class, we're teaching you Word 2016. If you're in an intro to accounting class, you're learning accounting, those types of things. But that's not all employers look for. They also look for a well-rounded component to their employees. So, are you a team player? You have to be a team player. Can you get along well with others? That's an important component, because here's the deal. Employers do not want to hear that you're not getting along with everybody you work with. You don't have to love them. You don't have to go out to dinner with them if you don't want to, but you do have to get along with them at work. So are you a team player? Are you self-motivated? Are you detailed-oriented? Are you organized? Think of all of those things as well. And if those are key attributes about you and it's important for the job, put those in there as well. I really advocate that, because employers are looking for that. You could be so super smart from a hard skills perspective, but if you can't get along well in the office, you're going to be just as difficult of an employee to manage as if you didn't have the hard skills necessary. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of the resume, okay? Whether you choose to do, a chronological or the functional, what is listed there really would be appropriate for your particular resume. Now, as I was sharing with you, the resume is not the only thing that we need to worry about when we're job searching. We have to be concerned about references as well as cover letters. So we're going to just touch on those a little bit as well. Now, students come to me because I've been teaching for a number of years, and they come to me and say, hey, Melanie, will you be a reference for me? Typically, I will say yes. But the thing you have to remember is, I'm not going to lie for you. So you have to be sure that you have a degree of comfort in what I'm going to say about you. So I tell my students, choose your references carefully. Make sure you are comfortable and know what the person that is going to be a reference for you is going to say about you. Be sure you ask your reference before you put them down. Because no one wants to be cold called out of the middle of nowhere, like, oh, I'm calling for a reference for Joe Smith, and you're completely caught off guard. Make sure you talk to your references. They are fine being a reference for you. And typically 3 references are sufficient. Most companies will say we'd like 3 professional references. You want to gather their accurate contact information. And so this is everything. You want their correct name, their address, phone number, cell phone if they're willing to give it, email address. All of that needs to be listed clearly and concisely. You do not want to put your references on your resume. That's not where they belong. They belong on a separate sheet of paper, typically at the top, references for Melanie Zandi. That's what I would put. I would put it nicely centered at the top. I might use the same type of font or bolding that I used for my resume. I would definitely use the same type of paper that I would use for my resume, and I would highlight that information accordingly. You want to keep your references informed. I'm actively job searching right now, so you could be getting calls about my references at any particular point throughout the course of the next several months. Once you get a job, give your references a quick call or a quick email or a quick text. Hey, listen, I have my first job out of college. I'm all set. I'm all good. I'm not job searching actively any longer, okay? If you pick your job search back up again, make sure you advise them. And always thank your references, because they are going out there on a limb for you. I always tell students, I'm more than willing to be your reference, but I'm going to be honest, and I will gladly take my time and answer questions about you as a student or as somebody that has worked for me or something along that line, but I'm definitely going to do it in a way that is professional and that is honest. So if you didn't create a good impression with me, I'm probably going to share that as well. Yes, sir.
There's a gentleman who did martial arts with me. He applied to be a police officer, and he threw my name down as a reference. And they called, and I wouldn't let this guy watch my dog. And I thought it was a threat to society, and so I explained that to the interviewer. Sadly, he didn't get the job. Good for society.
Yeah. But see, thank you, Sam. That's such a great example where, it's happened to you and you're like, I'm not giving this person a good recommendation. And clearly he didn't run it by you first. So it is really important. And again, if we're looking at that end result where you want that job, you want those references to say something good about you. The worst case would be, so you put these references down and you have a great resume and they're considering you for an interview, and then they call your references and, there's nothing good to be said about you, then that's going to derail just as quickly. So just some final tips. Like I said, a potential employer is going to look at your resume for about 10 to 20 seconds. Make sure you get what you want them to get, what they need out of it in that first glance. You want to put your best foot forward and have those things just pop out of your resume, because really that's what's going to get you the job interview. Also, you want to include a cover letter and references when mailing it out or electronically submitting it. Also in your packet from this workshop, I gave you some samples of cover letter guidance as well, because that's really also just as important as your resume. And the idea on the cover letter is you're going to be able to showcase, additional elements about yourself in your cover letter that can be a little more directed towards what you've done in your resume. You can pretty much share that, elaborate on that a little bit more, and then include your resume with that. And as I shared with you, most of the time, any students come to me, they have to electronically submit. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But I always tell students, when you go to an interview, take those hard copies of your resume, cover letter, and references with you, because you never know when you might have the opportunity to present that again as well. Okay? So that's as far as I have for my formal presentation. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead, sir.
Use a cover letter for like each company you're applying for instead of redoing your own resume. How those skills would be.
You definitely do want to do a different cover letter for each respective company. But I would really advocate tweaking your resume here or there when you know the exact job you're applying for. Like right now, if you're getting set to graduate in May, let's say, you might be drafting your resume and maybe it's a little generic, right? You're putting everything down, all of that information. But maybe the first job opening you're going to apply for is going to be an accounting position. You might want to tweak that a little more, showcase those accounting skills a little more, that kind of thing. So I would definitely tweak your resume each time for a different job opening. And then, yes, you're right, definitely do a new cover letter each time. Go ahead, Stan.
So, where do you stand as far as tying this to LinkedIn, or is that another workshop that?
Well, that might be another workshop, like the networking workshop. Yeah, I mean, like do students,
like with LinkedIn, is a Rolodex on steroids, but you, a lot of the elements that you have on your resume are also part of LinkedIn, talking about the different jobs you had and descriptions. And so a lot of those counsel that you provided here would be applicable also to LinkedIn. And it's important. I think it's important for everybody to have a LinkedIn profile and to be getting this network, so you can put your resume into action and say, hey, I'm now looking for a job, and you point me in the right direction.
And I think that's such an important component. I mean, you coming from your computer background, students are hesitant, let's just put it that way, to utilize those types of services because they're not maybe not comfortable with LinkedIn or don't exactly know. And so I do advocate for students to, when you're putting yourself out there, put yourself out there, put yourself on LinkedIn, because that's the professional profile, and businesses are looking there and seeing what you have to offer. So utilizing those types of media outlets as well. But I don't know if students are as comfortable doing that. They should be. Well, I mean, you're comfortable doing all that because you.
No, but it's where professional.
It is. It's where professionals do business. Yeah.
Right. If you're a professional.
That's a good point. Good point. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Patty.
I'm just thinking of this as preventative or after dinner. Could you comment on the exit interview?
The exit interview, like when you're done, or like how you should follow up, or
different employers will, I'm sure, someone who's leaving and say, I'd like to do an exit interview. And you have an option to say yes or no. And there's these tricky things that go on in exit interviews that can make it difficult later on if you want to use
them as a reference.
Depending on what you comment on, because sometimes folks have commented on things that they thought their supervisor could have
improved or something.
And then so.
Yeah, I do think that's a tricky aspect of things, because I mean, anytime you leave a job, you want to be sure you've left it on some positive terms, right? Because here's the deal: you don't want to burn any bridge. So I think that is difficult, wherein you're trying to maintain honesty about what went on within your job experience, but at the same time not burning any bridges associated with that. And students have come to me in the past and have said, oh, I hated this job was horrible, and whatever. And I've always tried to share with students that find some positive, redeeming something in any job that you've had. Do the best job that you can, because you never know when the person that you've left that job for might be a new boss somewhere else or a manager or something somewhere else. So you never know. So I try to be very, let's say, diplomatic when leaving and share what you can by being honest, but not too much that then creates that animosity basically, or that closing of the door. Especially because, let's face it, we live in small towns, and these are small communities that we live in. People share. A lot of times job opportunities come as by word of mouth, and so your positive aspects of your job and your negative aspects of your job will be by word of mouth. So you want to keep it on the positive side for sure. Well, thank you all so much, and even everybody else that's out there watching on YouTube Live or later on, I appreciate your participation, and thank you so much.
Good job.
Thanks, Dan. You're so nice to me. And thank you for coming. I appreciate it so much.